I built a bridge with my own hands, paid for every plank, every bolt, every hour of labor. It was the only way to reach my river cabin, my land, my property, my peace. Then, one morning, a letter showed up from the HOA. They weren't thanking me. They weren't asking permission. They were billing me for maintenance on my bridge. At first, I thought it was a mistake until the fines started stacking up. The warnings turned into threats, and suddenly they were claiming control over something I built myself. That's when I realized this wasn't about a bridge anymore. So how did a private structure turn into their property overnight? And why were they so desperate to take it from me?
The cabin wasn't supposed to be complicated. It was meant to be an escape. After years of noise, crowded streets, and neighbors stacked wall to wall, finding that small riverfront property felt like winning something I didn't even know I was missing. The water ran slow and steady behind the trees, the air felt cleaner, and for the first time in a long time, things were quiet. There was just one catch. The only way to reach the property was an old, half-rotted wooden bridge that stretched across a narrow part of the river. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Loose planks, rusted bolts, sections that dipped when you stepped on them. The previous owner didn't try to hide it either. He made it very clear the bridge was use at your own risk. That didn't sit right with me. If I was going to live there, even part-time, I needed something safe, something solid. So before I even fully moved in, I made a decision. I'd rebuild it myself. No contractors, no shortcuts. Just weeks of hauling materials, measuring, cutting, and working from sunrise to sunset. Every beam was reinforced, every plank secured, every detail double-checked. By the time it was done, the difference was night and day. What used to feel like a gamble now felt permanent, reliable. It wasn't just a bridge anymore. It was the only connection to my home. For a while, everything stayed exactly how I imagined it would be. Quiet mornings, the sound of water moving in the background, the kind of stillness you can't find in the city. No interruptions, no complaints, no one telling you what you can or can't do. At least, that's what I thought. Because a few weeks later, I started noticing small things. A car I didn't recognize slowing down near the entrance, someone stopping just long enough to look, and then driving off. A pair of footprints near the edge of the bridge that definitely weren't mine. And once, late in the afternoon, I caught someone standing at the far end, just staring at the structure like they were inspecting it. The moment they saw me, they turned around and left without saying a word. That was the first time something felt off. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe someone had heard the old bridge was replaced and just wanted to see it. But then the letters started showing up. Not aggressive at first, just official-looking envelopes with unfamiliar names and logos, neatly printed, stamped, and addressed directly to me. I almost ignored the first one, but something about it didn't feel random. And when I finally opened it, that quiet, peaceful feeling I'd come there for started to slip away. The letter didn't look threatening, at least not at first. It was clean, formal, almost polite, like something you'd expect from a management office, not a warning. It welcomed me to the community, mentioned shared responsibilities, and briefly introduced the homeowners association I didn't even realize I was part of. That was the first problem. I had never agreed to an HOA. There was nothing in the purchase process that made it feel like one of those tightly controlled neighborhoods with endless rules and fines. This place was quiet, tucked away, almost hidden. The idea that someone, somewhere, thought they had authority over it didn't sit right. But I kept reading. Buried halfway down the page was a line that changed everything. It referred to community infrastructure maintenance obligations and listed the bridge as one of those shared structures. My bridge. At first, I thought it had to be referring to the old one, the rotting structure that was there before I even bought the property. Maybe this was just outdated paperwork, something they hadn't updated yet. So I ignored it. That turned out to be a mistake. A week later, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't as friendly. It was labeled as an official notice, and it included an itemized bill. Materials, labor, ongoing maintenance reserves, all assigned to me. The number at the bottom wasn't small, and suddenly this didn't feel like a misunderstanding anymore. It felt deliberate. I went back through my documents that night, every page from the purchase agreement to the disclosures. I was looking for anything, any mention of shared ownership, easements, HOA authority. There was nothing that clearly said they owned the bridge, but there was something else, a vague clause. One of those lines written just ambiguous enough to be ignored unless you were specifically looking for it. It mentioned access structures and community usage rights tied to certain properties along the river. It didn't name my bridge directly, but it didn't exclude it either. That was enough for them. A few days later, I saw it happen in real time. A car pulled up near the entrance again, the same slow, deliberate movement I'd noticed before. But this time, it didn't leave. Two people stepped out, both holding clipboards. They walked straight toward the bridge like they'd been there before, like they knew exactly where they were going. I stepped outside before they could make it halfway across. They didn't look surprised to see me. If anything, they looked expected. No introductions, no apologies, just a calm exclamation that they were conducting an inspection on behalf of the HOA. That word again. They spoke like the bridge was already theirs, like my work, my time, my money, it all fell under their authority now. I told them they were mistaken. They didn't argue. They just made notes, measured things, took pictures, walked the entire length of the bridge like it was public property. And then they left. That same night, another notice arrived, this one digital, faster, more direct. It referenced the inspection, listed compliance concerns, mentioned that modifications had been made without HOA approval. Modifications. That's what they called it. Not construction, not ownership, just unauthorized changes. That was the moment it clicked. They weren't recognizing the bridge as mine at all. They were treating it like I had altered something that already belonged to them. And if that was the case, then the bill wasn't the end of it. It was just the beginning. The next week proved it. The fine started small, almost insignificant. Administrative fees, late notices, processing charges, the kind of amounts that feel annoying but manageable. But they didn't stop. Every few days something new appeared, another violation, another charge, another deadline. Failure to submit construction plans, failure to approval, failure to comply with structural guidelines. It didn't matter that none of those requirements had ever been communicated before. To them, it was already a closed case. And the numbers started climbing. What began as a single bill turned into a growing total that felt less like a mistake and more like pressure. Intentional pressure. Then came the letter that changed the tone completely. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about access. According to the HOA, the bridge wasn't just a structure. It was a shared access point for multiple properties in the area, which meant by their rules, I couldn't restrict its use. I read that line twice, then a third time, because if they were serious, it meant strangers had the right to cross directly into my property. No permission, no notice, just access. And suddenly, those footprints made sense. The car slowing down, the people stopping to look. They weren't curious. They thought they were allowed to be there. I didn't wait this time. The next morning, I went out early and stood near the entrance. I didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, someone showed up. They walked toward the bridge like they owned the place. No hesitation, no second thought. Until they saw me. That's when everything paused. A brief moment where neither of us said anything, but the confusion was obvious. Not just from them, from me too. Because now it was real. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. It wasn't letters or emails or fake clauses buried in documents. It was people physically stepping on something I built, like it belonged to them. And that feeling, that loss of control over something so personal, hit harder than any fine ever could. I told them to stop. Told them this was private property. They hesitated, then slowly stepped back. But not before saying something that stuck with me long after they left. They mentioned the HOA, like that explained everything, like that was supposed to override whatever I said. And maybe in their minds, it did. That's when I realized this wasn't just a disagreement between me and an organization. It was bigger than that. Because if enough people believed the HOA had authority, then it didn't matter what was true. It mattered what they could enforce, and they were getting more aggressive by the day. A final notice arrived at the end of the week. Bold text, clear language, no room for interpretation. If the violations weren't resolved, if the fines weren't paid, further action would be taken. Legal action, restrictions, even potential liens on the property. I stood there reading it, the river moving quietly behind me, the bridge solid beneath my feet, and for the first time since I bought the place, it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like something I had to defend. And the worst part, I still didn't know how far they were willing to go, but something told me they weren't bluffing.
The final notice didn't give me much time. 7 days. That was all they allowed before escalating the situation into something legally enforceable. The wording was cold, precise, carefully designed to sound inevitable. Like no matter what I believed or what was actually true, they had already decided how this was going to end. But something about that deadline changed everything for me. Up until that point, I had been reacting, opening letters, reading notices, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. Now, I stopped reacting and started digging. I went back to the beginning, not just my purchase documents, but the history of the land itself. Old property records, surveys, archived maps, anything that could show exactly what existed before I got there, and more importantly, who had the right to control it. What I found didn't come all at once. It came in fragments. A survey from years ago that showed the river boundary clearly, but no permanent bridge structure. A county filing that referred to the crossing as temporary access. And then something very deeper, an older document tied to the HOA itself. It outlined shared infrastructure responsibilities, but only for structures that were officially approved, registered, and maintained under their authority. Anything outside of that didn't count. That was the crack. The one thing they were hoping I wouldn't notice. Because if the bridge I built was never submitted to them, never approved, never recorded as part of their system, then by their own rules, it wasn't theirs. Not even partially. But that wasn't the only thing. There was another detail, one that shifted this from a simple dispute into something much bigger. The original bridge, the one that existed before I bought the property, was never formally transferred into HOA control either, which meant something critical. They had been treating that crossing like shared property for years, without actually having the legal foundation to back it up. And if that was true, if they had been collecting fees, enforcing rules, and asserting authority over something they didn't legally own, then this wasn't just overreach, it was exposure. And suddenly their urgency made sense. The inspections, the fines, the pressure. They weren't just trying to control my bridge, they were trying to lock it into their system before anyone questioned it, before I questioned it. That realization hit hard, but it also gave me something I hadn't had since this started: leverage. The meeting was already scheduled. They had called it a compliance hearing, but it felt more like a setup. A room full of people who had already made up their minds, expecting me to show up, apologize, and agree to whatever terms they put in front of me. That's what they thought this would be. They were wrong. The room was exactly what I expected. Long table, neatly arranged chairs, documents stacked in front of each board member. Calm faces, controlled expressions. They started immediately. No small talk, no introductions. Just a list of violations read out like a script. Unauthorized construction, failure to comply, outstanding fines. Each point delivered with the same steady tone, like this was routine, like I was just another problem they were about to resolve. Then they asked for my response. And for a moment, I said nothing. I let the silence sit. Because for the first time since this started, I wasn't the one being pushed. They were. I placed the documents on the table slowly, one by one. Surveys, records, filings. And then I started talking. Not defensively, not emotionally, just clearly. I pointed out the absence of any official record tying the bridge, old or new, to HOA ownership. I referenced their own governing documents, highlighting the exact language they had relied on and the conditions they had quietly ignored. I walked them through the timeline, showing that the structure they claimed authority over had never legally been part of their system. And then I stopped, because that was enough. The shift in the room was immediate. Not dramatic, not loud, but undeniable. The confidence they started with faded. The certainty cracked. They weren't interrupting anymore. They were listening, carefully. And that's when I pushed it further. Because this wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about exposing what they had been doing. I brought up the fees. The years of maintenance charges tied to something they didn't officially control. The enforcement actions taken against other properties under the same assumption. I didn't need to accuse them directly. The implication was enough. Because they understood what I was really saying. If this went beyond that room, if it reached the right people, this wouldn't just be a dispute. It would be a problem they couldn't contain. And suddenly they didn't have an immediate response. No scripted answer, no prepared statement. Just silence. One of them finally spoke, but it wasn't the same tone as before. It was slower,
more careful. They suggested a review period, a reassessment of the situation, a pause on enforcement. Everything they had been so firm about, suddenly negotiable. But by then, I wasn't interested in their adjustments, because I had already seen how far they were willing to go when they thought they had control, and I knew exactly what would happen the moment they felt comfortable again. So I made it clear. This didn't end with a pause. It ended with correction. Every fine, every notice, every claim of authority over that bridge, gone. Not reduced, not negotiated, removed. Completely. The room tightened again. Not with confidence this time, but with pressure. Because now the decision wasn't just about me. It was about what admitting that meant. What it opened the door to. What it said about everything they had done before this moment. And for a few seconds, it felt like it could go either way. That they might push back. That they might double down, drag it further, force this into something even bigger. But then something shifted. A look. A quiet exchange between two of them. And just like that, the resistance collapsed. They agreed to review the fines, to reassess the bridge's status, to clarify jurisdiction. Carefully chosen words. But the meaning was clear. They were backing off. Not publicly, not dramatically, but enough. More than enough. The meeting ended without any official resolution. No announcement, no apology. Just a quiet understanding that things had changed. But the real moment didn't happen in that room. It happened a few days later, when the next letter arrived. Same format, same official tone, but completely different content. All violations, withdrawn. All fines, cleared. No mention of maintenance obligations. No claim over the bridge. Nothing. Like it had never happened. I stood there reading it, the same place I had opened a first notice, but this time everything felt different. Not because it was over, but because of how close it came to going the other way. Because if I hadn't pushed back, if I hadn't looked deeper, questioned harder, they would have taken it. Quietly, completely, and no one would have said a word. I stepped outside after that, walked across the bridge slowly, feeling every plank under my feet. Solid, unchanged, still mine. But now it meant something else too, because this wasn't just a structure anymore. It was proof. Proof of how far they were willing to go, and how far I had to go to stop them. And the part that stayed with me the most, this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a system that almost worked.
For a few days after that letter arrived, everything went quiet. No emails, no notices, no cars slowing down near the entrance. It was the kind of silence I had originally come here for, but now it felt different. Not peaceful, controlled, like something had paused, not ended. I didn't trust it. Because once you've seen how far something can go, you don't just assume it won't try again. So I didn't stop where they did. I followed through. The first step was making everything official, not just on my side, but at the county level. I had the bridge surveyed, documented, and recorded properly as a private structure tied directly to my property. Every measurement, every boundary line, every structural detail was filed in a way that left no room for interpretation. If there had been any gray area before, there wasn't anymore. Then I went further. I requested copies of past HOA records related to the area, maintenance logs, fee distributions, infrastructure reports. It took time and more than a few ignored emails before anything came through, but eventually, pieces started to show up. And when they did, they confirmed exactly what I suspected. The bridge, both the old one and mine, had been referenced repeatedly in internal documents, treated like shared infrastructure, included in discussions about upkeep and access, but never officially registered, never legally transferred. It had existed in this strange space where everyone assumed it was theirs, but no one had actually proven it. And that assumption had been enough, for years, until now. I didn't take it public, not in the way most people would expect. No posts, no complaints blasted across forums or community boards. I didn't need attention. What I needed was permanence. So I kept everything documented, organized, ready. Not as a reaction, but as a safeguard. Because the real outcome of this situation wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure it couldn't happen again. And slowly, things began to shift. The presence around the property disappeared completely.
No more curious inspections. No more unexpected visitors treating the bridge like a public walkway. Word must have spread quietly, the same way their authority had once spread, through assumption, through unspoken understanding. Only this time, the understanding was different. That bridge wasn't theirs. And more importantly, it never had been. But the bigger change didn't happen on my side of the river. It happened within the HOA. I started hearing things, not directly, but through small indirect mentions. Conversations between neighbors, passing comments, questions being raised. About fees, about authority, about what exactly the HOA could and couldn't enforce. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just doubt. And doubt, in a system built on quiet compliance, spreads fast. Because once one assumption breaks, people start looking at everything else differently. I wasn't the only one who had paid those kinds of fees over the years. I wasn't the only one who had received notices that felt official enough to follow without question. And now, for the first time, people were starting to ask why. That was the part the HOA couldn't control anymore. Not with letters, not with inspections, not with carefully worded policies. Because this wasn't about enforcement now. It was about credibility. And once that starts slipping, it doesn't come back easily. A few weeks later, there was a general meeting. I didn't go. I didn't need to. Whatever needed to be said had already been said. In documents, in records, in the quiet realization that something wasn't as solid as everyone thought it was. But I heard enough afterward to understand what happened. The language had changed. They were more careful, more precise, avoiding broad claims, limiting what they referenced as shared property. It wasn't an admission. It was a correction. The kind organizations make when they realize they've been standing on something unstable for too long. And just like that, the pressure that had once been aimed at me disappeared. Completely. The fines never came back. The bridge was never mentioned again. And the HOA, for all its authority, stayed at a distance. Exactly where it should have been from the start. But the real impact of all this wasn't in the paperwork or the outcome. It was in how it changed the way I saw the place. Because when I first bought the cabin, I thought I was stepping into something simple, quiet, isolated, free from the kind of control that exists in crowded neighborhoods and managed communities. But what I learned instead was that control doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it builds quietly, through assumptions, through vague language, through systems that rely on people not asking too many questions. And most of the time, it works. Because most people don't push back. Not because they agree, but because it feels easier to comply than to challenge something that presents itself as official. I almost did the same thing. If that first bill had been smaller, if the notices had been less aggressive, if I hadn't taken the time to look deeper, I probably would have paid it. And once that happened, it wouldn't have stopped there. It never does. That's the part that stays with me the most. Not the confrontation, not the meeting, not even the moment they backed down, but how close it came to becoming permanent. How easily something that wasn't true almost became reality. All it would have taken was silence, or hesitation, or the assumption that they must know something I didn't. But they didn't. They were relying on the idea that I wouldn't question it. And when that didn't work, everything else unraveled. Now when I walk across that bridge, it feels different than it did before all this started. Not because it changed, but because I did. Every plank, every beam, it's still exactly the way I built it. Solid, steady, unquestionably mine. But now it represents something more than just access to a piece of land. It represents a line, a boundary that had to be defended, and the understanding that ownership isn't just about what you build or buy. It's about what you're willing to stand your ground on when someone else tries to take it. The river still moves the same way it always did. Quiet, constant, unbothered by any of it. The cabin still gives me the space I was looking for. But there's a clarity now that wasn't there before. A kind of awareness that doesn't go away once you've experienced something like this. Because the truth is, this wasn't unique. It wasn't some one-time mistake or isolated situation. It was a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Push as far as it could, until someone pushed back harder. And most of the time, no one does. So the question isn't just about what happened here. It's about how many other situations like this are happening quietly, right now. How many people are being told something is required, something is owed, something is controlled, without ever stopping to ask if it actually is. Because once you've seen how easily that line can be crossed, you start to wonder, where else is it happening? And who's going to be the one to stop it next?